Another Monday of getting dressed up to go to the living room, huh?
Mm-hmm. I had a deposition before this, so ever since we had one person not wear pants, wore a suit with boxers,
Wait, what? Oh, come on.
they put dress code in the court. For Zoom.
All set.
They gotta get that under control.
Yeah, pants are.
Was that Barb? Are we all set, Barb?
Ma'am, you're ready to go.
All right. Okay, let's go ahead and call the meeting to order. Looks like we have everybody here. Yep, okay. Welcome to the Special Board of Education meeting and open session workshop, where we will talk, have a conversation and vote on the school resource officer contract. This is going to be an open discussion. We'll go by individual board members just to say a few words. And just want to remind everybody that this is a very important topic. It's been, we've had a lot of great discussions in the past, and just want to make sure everybody is, just a reminder that everybody has different perspectives, and to respect one another during this conversation, so that everybody is able to feel comfortable in sharing about their perspectives and their concerns, and optimism moving forward. And so I'm just going to go ahead and open it up. So whoever would like to start, if you could just let me know by raising your hand. And Ali?
Thank you so much for allowing us to have this conversation. I think it's a really important conversation to have. And I think even more important is the actions we take to address some of the real issues that have been created by in-school policing. And so I think in the spirit of truth and reconciliation, we have to acknowledge that over the course of the entire lifespan of this program of policing in schools, the majority of students every year to be arrested in school are African-American children. And so policing in schools has, had an impact in terms of racial profiling within education. I also think it's important for us to acknowledge that it's not a developmentally appropriate solution to arrest and incarcerate children. And so we need solutions for young people that actually honor where young people are at in their lives and the kinds of challenges our students face. And I think we are far better at navigating developmentally appropriate solutions for some children than for others. African-American students have been exposed to the harshest punishments available to our community over and over and over again. And I think part of what we're doing today is making decisions that allow for us to reconcile racial disparities in terms of policing and discipline within education.
Great, thank you, Ali. Nikki?
I have to agree. It's with my colleague Ali. This is not a developmentally appropriate practice. I've been doing juvenile law for 16 years, and I can tell you, kids aren't many adults, and that putting a child in handcuffs in JRC is one of the most heartbreaking things you're ever going to see. Childhood is a place of learning, a place where you make mistakes, not a place where it should haunt you, and it's not a place where there should be criminal ramifications. We need to realize that this did have a negative impact on our Black and brown and disabled students. These are groups that were racially profiled or ability profiled. And these are issues that caused a lot of harm. I understand there's a lot of fear and there's a lot of worry, and I get that. And I respect that worry and that fear, and I'm glad that this board can come together to have this kind of discussion on such an important topic.
Thank you, Nikki. Who's next? Okay, so Chris, Savion, and Chris, you don't want to speak on this topic at all? Jane Belmore? Jane, you're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate this conversation, Gloria, and the board. And I just want to say that, however this conversation turns out, our district safety and security team has really done a lot of important work this year with our administrators and teachers and our security personnel. And that work involves a lot of teamwork, many partnerships with our community and other groups that we work with. So we do have important processes and procedures in place to ensure that schools are safe and welcoming learning environments. And we too really want to make sure that that continues, and we really remain committed to doing that work. So I just wanted you in the community to know that we will have safe schools, and we are committed to ensuring that.
Great, thank you, Jane.
Mhm.
Ananda, Chris, Savion, Christina Gomes-Schmidt. Chris Crucy?
Thank you, everyone, for your comments. Recent events have highlighted the racism, fear, and violence that Black people experience every day, and systemic racism places an undue burden on the achievement of our Black and Brown students. And for those reasons, I support ending the contract with MPD. And we need a plan in short order. I really think that we need to be conscious of the fact that we had an ERO ad hoc committee that met for almost 2 years, that included representation from across the community and that had open meetings with public participation. And I think we need to use the report that came out of that committee as a starting point for our work moving forward, because this vote is just a step in moving forward in a new direction. I want to just highlight an overarching recommendation that came out of that report. We recommend that MMSD work with the school community to identify and strive to achieve conditions where all members of the school community feel safe and no members of the school community feel unreasonably criminalized or disproportionately targeted with police interaction. And a couple of more detailed recommendations from that report include that security staff job descriptions should be reviewed and enhanced, and that they should receive training in de-escalation, trauma-informed intervention, and adolescent brain development. And there was also a recommendation to create an advisory committee that reflects the demographics of our high schools and includes staff, school board members, students, and community representatives. So I think in short, we need to move quickly on 3 things. First of all, I think we need a safety plan that will go into effect on the first day of school that reflects that overarching recommendation from the ad hoc committee. I think we also need to convene the committee that was recommended in the report that will focus both on school safety and restorative justice. And finally, I think we need to have a conversation about how we plan and budget for additional staff needs, including the recommendation for security staffing that's in the report. Ending the contract frees up enough resources for maybe 5 positions. I think we need to seriously consider whether this is enough additional staffing and how we get the most benefit from staffing investments. Removing EROs is just a step in addressing systemic racism in our schools, and it could be a really wonderful step forward. We also need to be very conscious that it's not a step backward if we implement a plan that continues to make our schools feel prison-like. Thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Savion?
Yeah, so I was trained in restorative justice as a junior in high school. Myself and other student leaders and specialists from YWCA, including Ananda at the time at that pilot program at La Follette. At the time, we made a commitment to conflict resolution and healing without the need of a punitive and potentially violent threat from the state. We resolve fights, arguments, and more. And I think that was a demonstration that this work is possible, and that it has been demonstrated before, and that what's required is political will and the financial commitment to make that work to scale possible. And so I really echo Chris's comments in saying that this has to be the beginning of a new conversation about what we want safety and a welcoming environment for what our schools to look like. And it starts with forming those committees and starting these big conversations with our school communities. I think what has always been true, but what has been exposed with events over the past month or so, is that right now the institution of policing is incompatible with, and in fact in direct contradiction into what we hope to create for our learning environments for our Black students. And we have to take that seriously. And so I'm in full support of ending this contract tonight and beginning this new conversation with our community tonight.
Thank you, Savion. So we have Ananda, Julia, Christina. Julia, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I've seen a significant amount of support from students that I've talked to within MMSD on social media through having conversations with them. And I think that I'm really glad we're having this conversation. And just on behalf of MMSD students, I'm definitely in favor of ending the contract.
Thank you, Julia. Ananda, Chris, you guys are both. If you don't want to say anything, that's fine.
No.
Christina?
Yeah, thank you. So I, like the rest of the board members, have been hearing an urgent call to action from the larger community to reform systems that disproportionately affect our Black and Brown students. And I just want to say that I understand and share the deep desire to do something differently, to create real and lasting change that will lead to better outcomes for students. And I believe we have consensus in our community and our district and on our board that change is needed. My concern about the decision today is focused on process and timeline for creating change. I'm concerned that we haven't listened to our high school communities fully in making this change going forward. We haven't looked at the report and data from this school year to understand the results from the change in practices that we implemented this school year, following the recommendations of our SRO ad hoc committees. That report is due on July 15th, so I hope that will be a part of whatever we do going forward. I think that whether you agree with the presence of the SROs in our schools right now or not, they do have a leadership role in our schools. They're part of a team of administrators, safety and security assistants, counselors, social workers, and others who work every day to address critical incidents and situations in our schools with students and even adults from outside our school communities. If we remove the SROs, creating a plan for how to move forward will require the focus of our high school and district staff, which is really important, to fill this leadership role in a way that maintains safety and security. And this will require time. There have been calls from the community from a lot of different angles to replace SROs with more support for students, including more counselors, social workers, community liaisons, and mentors. MTI recommended the removal of SROs only if 33 additional support staff are added to our high schools. And I think we need to discuss what our schools really need to serve our students well. Deciding how to move forward will require some time and space. And I appreciate so many people being interested in trying to figure this out and trying to do this collaboratively to move things forward. And I know that to some, concerns about time or leadership to do this may sound like an excuse or a reason to stall when the momentum for needed change exists. However, I think our schools do need time and space to do this and figure out the best path forward. So I look forward, to discussing this with all of you.
Thank you, Chris. Ananda, would you like to weigh in on?
Yeah, I want to make sure that I hear from everyone before I share, because I have a very different experience than most people on this board, because I did not grow up in the K-12 system here in the US. And one of the reasons that I came to the US is to flee the violence that was happening both in the city that I live, but in the country, the violence in particular towards young people, towards women, and have seen how personally that had impacted many of my friends and family members, in particular the ones that have a much darker complexion than mine. And 20 years ago, I was a firm believer that in this country, we upheld the values of freedom, the values of safety, the values of due process and justice, and that was applicable to everyone. It did not take me long to realize that that was not true, as I experienced that personally as an immigrant with constant threats from the police, specifically the times that I was undocumented, and then also witnessing and observing the impact on the Black community. Once I learned about those injustices towards communities of color in the US and the historical context that have painted a very different landscape for me, I was out there sharing and trying to educate others, because I thought that if only people knew the impact of those injustices on communities of color, that they would change their behavior, and they would change their policies, and they would change their practice. And I was wrong. I was going around, and people wanted to see data. They wanted me to prove, and they wanted me to, show me more information. And once I started working within systems or alongside systems, I had a greater access to data. And I started sharing with people, here's a very extensive body of information and research and data. The strong correlation of increasing police funding correlating with increase in disciplinary incidents, predominantly minor violation, decrease in graduation rates, decrease in higher education enrollment, exposure to law enforcement, increased recidivism and criminal records, which then decrease youth employment, and then further adult employment. Here's a body of research around preventive and positive interventions that have yielded greater results in communities that have decided to remove officers and in particular decriminalize students. And here in Wisconsin, DPI has released plenty of reports that shows Black students and students with disabilities are 5 times or more likely to be to receive out of school suspensions. Black students 6 times are likely to experience out of school suspensions than their peers. And then, the school shootings have also created another level of threat, and where people thought that, having officers would prevent that. There's no research that says that is true. Still, people wanted to use that as a argument to keep officers in school. There is no evidence that suggests that police make schools safer or mitigates the effect of school violence. So the violences that we're experiencing in our communities and that we have experienced in many of our lives as young people are going to still be there. It hasn't, police in there have no significant impact. Often, to quite the contrary, their presence in situations that could be handled by counselors or teachers or mentors or psychologists often escalate, often gives a greater opportunity for students to become incarcerated or receive citations and so on. This board has had a predominantly white board members, well-rounded individuals who want nothing more than ensuring the safety and well-being for our students. They want the success of our students, and I have no doubt of that. Madison and Wisconsin are not short of plans. We are not where we are today with this this badge of honor and stickers all over our communities across the state of Wisconsin, and in particular in Madison and Dane County, of ranking so high in disproportionality in education. We're not where we are here today because of lack of plans. Madison generates a greater amount of plans. Wisconsin does it too. So when I hear the dissenting around prioritizing more data, or have some board members calling me, wanting me to regurgitate more data or want to have more plans, to me, I hear the further marginalization of communities of color. I think conflating safety and law enforcement describes how deep racism runs in this country and where we have been for over 400 years, where Black and brown bodies have been surveilled, punished, controlled, marginalized, and criminalized. I'm in full support of removing the SROs immediately. And I'm full support of also engaging whatever other strategy we needed to make sure that our communities understand what exactly are we trying to do. That this is not just a matter of removing 4 adults out of the schools, that we're also saying to our students and our parents and our community that we are going to seriously engage in stopping, halting the criminalization of young people, the criminalization of students with IEPs, the criminalizations of the bodies of Black and brown students in our community. That we are also saying that we don't have all the answers. We are learning to do this anti-racism work alongside many other communities across the US, and we won't stop until we actually get it right. But stopping, halting, detouring because of lack of plans, because of more data, because of wanting to talk to so-and-so and so-and-so is continue to perpetuate racist practices. And I'm not going to be complicit for that. So thank you so much, Gloria, for scheduling this for us to have a conversation. Thank you for allowing me to take this much time and space, because it's really important to me, and I appreciate everyone listening. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ananda. Okay, I will go last, and then we'll have Ali read the motion. I want to take some time to thank every school resource officer who's ever worked in our schools, who have served in our school buildings every year for many years. Their service has helped lead us to incorporate restorative justice practices and innovative strategies for solving some of the most complex behavior issues, while also compassionately addressing the complex challenges that our students face every day. I'm a former police officer and detective. I think most people know that. I know firsthand the complex challenges within law enforcement. I have worked for years and dedicated my career to advocating for racial equity changes within the department. I support the men and women of the Madison Police Department. They respond every day with bravery and integrity to situations that our community has asked them to take on. Now is the time for our Madison Police Department and police departments across the country to face the challenges of racism that exist within their policies, procedures, and culture. And now is the time for all institutions to take a hard look at what they do and how they do it, and how they feed into the racist practices within their own institutions in our community. Since George Floyd's murder and the continued demands to remove school resource officers, I've had to put aside my own personal and professional views about police and schools to reflect on the many voices that have advocated for change. I want to thank you all for those who have done so. We must come together now to find a way to reimagine what safety and security looks like in our schools for the benefit of all of our students. Without school resource officers, everyone will have to play a role in developing new strategies and paradigms, including a continued relationship with the Madison Police Department. I wanted us to have a thoughtful, deliberative process and plan for phasing out our school resource officers. However, it seems that this community has requested movement sooner rather than later. The majority of my colleagues on the board have expressed their support for removal of SROs. The Madison Teachers Union, who are the voice of our teachers and staff, have supported the removal. The mayor and other elected officials have expressed support to remove the removal of SROs. There comes a time when a leader, a professional, has to listen, particularly during challenging times, to reassess and change direction depending on the will of the people. This is one of those times. This is the time for all of our partners to uplift and invest in our schools from your own individual position. I will be voting tonight to remove SROs. However, with the commitment to establish a safety and security committee of the board to work with the school district to ensure our students are safe and continue to evaluate the outcomes of arrests of Black and Brown students in our schools. So we will go ahead and move forward with the vote. I do, after Ali makes the motion and we vote, I do want to say a few words after that.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I also want to extend appreciation to the young people who have shown up at board meetings, to the students who have led us in this decision. We can't underestimate the impact that the death of George Floyd had on our country. In fact, for a lot of people, we waited 8 minutes and 42 seconds too long to change things. But we are here now, and it took a lot of young people and a lot of organizers advocating for change for a significant amount of time to get us to this moment. And so I'm incredibly proud to move that the Board of Education terminate the MMSD's contract for school resource officers effective immediately.
Second.
Thank you for seconding, Savion. And then we are doing a roll call vote.
So I think Chris has her hand up.
Yeah, I would just like to add an amendment to this, just to create a timeline and direct charge to our administration, in addition to the committee that Gloria has committed to making, that will report back to the board before the school year starts on an alternate safety and security plan for our high schools. It would include the additional supports we need for students and staff, both what's possible in the short term and a process for deciding on what long-term shifts are needed. I know we can't discuss the reallocation of funds that will be available from the dissolution of this contract, but I'd like to see that placed on a July agenda so we can get the additional support to the high schools for the work that they have ahead of them. So,
Chris, that's a really complicated amendment.
Oh, no, that's not the amendment, but I just was trying to explain why I was making the amendment. So can I go ahead and do that, or?
You would make the amendment and then you would need someone to second the amendment.
Okay. Sherry, did you have something you needed to add?
No, I thought that was your amendment. So I was.
No, it was not. I will, sorry, just an explanation to why I'm doing it. So the amendment is we direct the MMSD administration, including our chief of school operations, chief of high schools and high school principals to report to the board by August 20th of 2020, an updated safety and security plan for the 2021 school year for each of the comprehensive high schools that details protocols, including who will be responsible for responding to critical incidents within the schools and on the school grounds.
Second.
Chris, I'm not sure that that's an appropriate amendment because the amendment that's on the table is to cancel the contract, and what you're stating is not in furtherance of canceling the contract.
So how could she add that as a recommendation to the district to?
You could add that to the agenda, Gloria.
Right. It's not
live for the next meeting.
Because of the way it's agended as to either maintaining or canceling the contract. And so she can add that as a recommendation for another meeting, because I'm assuming we'll have another meeting about this. And if we're moving forward with either the recommendations from the prior committee or forming another committee, it's likely to get kind of confusing with giving an exact date to the administration to have a plan when we're supposed to be working with others as well and developing that plan.
So
Does that make sense?
So I think what we can do, Chris, is we can add it to the subcommittee recommendation when we set that subcommittee up, which is, we're going to try to get that set up soon, so that we can incorporate a timeline to that. How does that
Okay, I'll just reiterate, I think it's really important that we have something in place to detail what the plan is going forward before school starts again. So I appreciate that consideration.
Great, thank you. Okay, so, okay, go ahead, Ali.
So it's a roll call vote. So I would imagine I'm going to call Julia for your advisory vote first.
Aye.
Aye. Ananda,
Definitely aye.
Gloria,
Aye.
Savion,
Aye.
Chris Carusi,
Aye.
Chris Gomez-Schmidt,
Aye.
Nikki Vandermeulen,
Aye.
and myself, Ali Muldrow, aye. We have voted unanimously to terminate the contract between the Madison Metropolitan School District and the Madison Police Department, effective immediately. Thank you all so much for this work.
Great, thank you, Ali, for doing that motion. So just wanted, before we close out for tonight and we go on to the next regularly scheduled board meeting, is I just want to make an important point that for those watching and listening, that the decision to end the contract is a school board decision, and we just made it. And we have, it's not dependent on the mayor and the city council resolution to vote. That's supposed to, I think, occur tomorrow night. So while we thank them for their support for this action, we will not have to wait until they act for this decision to take into effect. I think there was some confusion last week from the media and our community, wondering whether they would have to continue to advocate for the city council to make a decision tomorrow. They can continue to advocate, but it is a school board's decision, and we just made it. So thank you all very much. We'll go ahead. Can I get a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Sorry. Thank you, Nikki.
A second, Ananda.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
All right. We are adjourned. We'll see you at the next meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.